schon an, aber für dich. Agathe, so we can hear you on the stream. May I? It's better when it's here.
Okay, then put it on the thingy.
Können wir Elixir noch einen Stock geben? Nee, das ist dir wahrscheinlich eh egal.
Oh my god.
Will dir was
Hallo.
sagen? Der kann auch.
Ja.
Where is my screen?
Elixir, when do you want to say something? You can do lightning talks afterwards, and you can
As you wish.
I don't see shit.
Wie ihr wollt. Do you need the screen? It would be useful if I could pull up one web page. Okay, Agathe,
Yeah.
can we quick?
Uh-huh.
Can he say some words before?
Of course. Yes.
Then the screen is all yours. And can he open a web page on your computer?
Oh my god. My setup. Wait.
Regular web page.
I don't see anything. Yeah.
Wie bitte? Ja. Gut gemacht.
I think this should work.
Okay, fine. So where do I type?
It's already in the. If you type now and then press enter. No, that's my personal stuff. Okay. What do I have to type?
CNA.
CNA. That's it? Ah, yeah. Punkt. A, R, what?
Ja, das war mein Plan.
So you can type. Yeah,
Hey guys,
that was the thing.
welcome to the Elixir Meetup today. I saw some one Malaga shirt today. Who else was in Malaga actually? Can I see some raise of hands? Oh, a ton of people. That's nice. Great. I wish I could have been there next time. We have a special guest today, just sneaked in, Elixir, and he's gonna tell us some words maybe. Can you just take the microphone from me so everyone can hear you also online?
Want to?
Yeah, let me just help.
Wake me up.
There you go.
Okay, so a couple of questions behind. Who speaks only English? Okay, so we're going to do then. You generally do this in English, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, fine. For those of you who speak German, I do speak German fluently. So if you want to talk to me later, although I sound like I was born in the United Kingdom, which is true, I do speak German, which is also true. I set up the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation about 5 years ago. I'm on the board. Who's actually a member of the Erlang ecosystem? Okay, 2. There's a lot of opportunity for the rest of you to join. It doesn't cost anything if you want to be basic members. Yeah, basic member is, okay, fine. So who's actually a paying member? Thank you. So a couple of them over here, some of them might have even voted for me in the last election or not. So anyway, we had our elections recently. We are a community-driven organization. We are supposed to be here for you. I estimate we've got about 100,000 people who use Elixir professionally in some capacity. So the some capacity would be defined as their first, second, or third programming languages in their environment. It is exceptionally important at the moment that we pay attention to ourselves as community, because if we don't, we're just going to get run over by Python, Rust, and AIs. So if you don't get out and join out and be part of the community, you should probably just go join one of these other groups. And maybe the right thing to do anyway is just to admit to our overlords that you're there anyway and just give up already. But if you want to be part of the resistance or whatever it is, you should come out and join the community and be active. As you may or may not be aware, we have been running a CNA. So who knows what a CNA is? Okay, not enough of you. So a CNA is a CVE numbering authority. This is the thing that MITA and the US had, which they then decided that they were not going to fund for a while, and then they decided, oh dear, they should fund it again for a while, but they may go back to not funding it anymore. But the European Union now is very concerned that they need their own system. So there's a European organization called ENISA. Who's heard of ENISA? Oh, good Lord. Okay. So ENISA is the European entity that's actually going to maybe managing vulnerabilities and software issues for the European Union. If any of you using technology professionally, you will have to start paying attention to what they do as well as what the Americans say, and they may actually disagree with one another at some point in the future because politics, but you'll have to be paying attention to both sets of entities at the moment. Anyway, we set up a CNA for the community. We are also talking to ENISA and the other things so that we become we're feeding data to the regulatory bodies in the European Union as well. As you can see, the number of CVEs that we've been reporting have gone from like nowhere to quite substantial. So how many of you were at FOSDEM last year? Okay. Not how many were at FOSDEM this year? Okay. How many of you have heard Daniel Stenberg rant about the topic of AI slop? Okay. Okay. So we need to put together a reading list, Chris, or something like that. Okay. Maybe I can set something. So Daniel Stenberg last year.
If you have a channel on the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation Slack where you post the reading list.
So I have already mentally taken away that thing that I should put Alistair's reading list out there. So yes, I will do the equivalent. So Daniel Stenberg last year. So who knows who Daniel Stenberg is? I want to see all hands. No? Oh, good Lord. Okay. People. All the hands. So he's the guy who's the maintainer of curl. Who's heard of curl? Okay, finally we get more than 50% of the hands. Excellent, well done, people. We've done, okay, so Daniel Stenberg ranted at FOSDEM last year about the fact that the AIs, all they did was produce AI slop. He was like, this is all crap, they're wasting my time, it's all a waste of time, keep them away from me. This year he was at FOSDEM, he was like, not quite so clear. A couple of months ago he came out and said, they are paying attention to what's going on, but they haven't found anything in my stuff. And then recently he had to cancel a trip to a conference because he had a whole bunch of, CVs on his in-basket that some AI had found. And Daniel is in the peculiar position of probably owning the code base that the most humans have ever looked at. So if you're familiar with the whole concept of open source stuff and the original idea that when enough people look at this, every bug will be shallow, that's true, but everybody goes, oh, somebody else has looked at this, so I don't need to pay any attention. So it's not really looked at as much as everybody would want to. But Daniel's code has probably been looked at more than most people's. If they're finding problems in that stuff, there are problems everywhere. So we started looking at things. There are a couple of folks in the community. So if you join up to the EEF as a basic member, you can just sign up. We have a security working group thing that's out on the Slack channel. There's a lot of comments going on over there, and I would encourage you to join and pay attention because it might bite you in the ass if you don't. There are folks in our community at the moment who are getting very good at using software to find vulnerabilities. Who's heard of Mythos? Ooh, interesting. Okay. Okay, so we haven't had access to Mythos yet. We were supposed to get it, but the White House said not so fast. But there are folks that have actually been playing around with this. Just basically go to Opus and or Claude and say, pretend you're Mythos, go find them anyway, and they mostly do. So this is just the things that we are going to post this quarter. We have a backlog of over 300. This is just in the top 100 repos on Hex. We have 21,000 repos on Hex. So I'm assuming who uses some repo that's on Hex that isn't your own? No, I want to see more. Okay, okay, fine. Okay, some hands going up. So we are trying to go through this and do the beach cleaning to get rid of this as fast as possible. But the AIs are coming thick and fast. So that's why community is important at the moment. I would encourage you some way, shape or form to get involved. I would encourage you to join up and come talk to me if you have companies that would also like to get involved in sponsors. And I think that's possibly it for the time being.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Alistair, just 1 second, maybe has somebody a question for Alistair before he leaves the stage? And
Take my mic off.
I have a question actually. That, how about, you said like hex packages, but what about the beam itself? Is that covered already?
We have been spending a decent amount of time looking at the beam too. So yes, that's one of the things that we are not neglecting it. Let's put it that way.
Nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alistair. And with that,
No? Okay.
any question that we missed? No. With that, let's Agathe take over and tell us about the famous last words.
Thank you. Yes, I am here to talk to you about a project that we wrapped up last year. It took us 3 years with some breaks, and I was there from the start to the end. And at the start, I thought we would never finish this thing, but we did. So I'm here to tell that story. I hope it's entertaining. At least I put some GIFs to entertain you. But let's first look at who were the players in this crazy project. We have bitcrowd. This is where you're sitting. This is where I work. We build software. We do all kinds of Elixir, Ruby, PWA, React. I think we can do pretty much anything. All software, all colors. The second player is also in the room with us today. It is Steady. Woohoo! Raise your hand if you're a client. So Steady Media is also a Berlin-based company, and they started as a startup. Now, I don't know if they're a startup anymore. I don't know what makes a startup nowadays, but their business model is that they allow media makers to finance what they're doing through subscription-based model, right? So I'm a podcaster. I can sign up there, set up some plans, some free, some trials, some paid. And then if my content's good enough, people are going to pay me through Steady. The third player in the room is called ChargeBee. And ChargeBee came up initially because as a startup, I think you want to focus on your product, which was the Media Maker's app. So they focused on this and they decided to outsource all the subscription management and the billing to a third party. So ChargeBee takes care of integrating with payment providers, payment gateways. It takes care of renewing the subscription, of billing the people, of creating the invoice. So it's a nice separation of concern. And the communication happens via API between the two services. So why the hell would they want to build a custom solution to replace this? Because on paper it looks fine. So let's look at the problems. And first, let's look at the reasons to move away. Not necessarily to build something custom, but just to move away. Of course, the first thing is the money. ChargeBee prices per usage, and the price every month of paying this service grew enough that they considered moving away to something either cheaper or to build their own thing. Then we have some more practical issues that were performance. They accumulated a volume of data on ChargeBee that was big enough that the UI of ChargeBee would time out for any type of queries that was not specific enough. And when you're a developer, when you're working in support, or when you're a finance person, not being able to query a collection of invoices spanning over 2 years, for example, that's quite problematic. So that's one other reason. And I think in general, there's some SaaS tensions of these software as a service trying to be generic enough to address all kinds of clients, but not specific enough to fit actually proper client needs. Trying to solve this by offering some flexibility, but then your client will just misuse your tool and hack around. And in general, I think there's also a problem of priorities for a software company that's not necessarily, for example, Germany-based. They don't necessarily have an interest in implementing the latest German regulations regarding billing as fast as the one based in the US, for example. So you also have a tension of like this SaaS being international and countries having proper regulations, legal regulations. Now, these are the reasons to move away, not to build something custom. So let's look at the reasons to build something custom. The first one is, of course, independence. And I think nowadays I don't need to explain this, but not having dependence to a third-party app, especially if it's not based in Europe, for example, it's becoming political enough that I think it's quite important. But that's my opinion, that's only for me. I think also you get a better vision when you build your feature because you're in control of the whole pipeline of your users from start to the end. So you can actually build something without having to spend days researching how the hell would we do this on ChargeBee? Can we even do it on ChargeBee? And if how, would it involve hack and how do we scale and all that? For developers, you get control and access to logs and database, which I think is not a minor thing. Being able to log what you actually care about, being able to access the data of your users from a developer perspective in a way that makes sense to you. And as I said, there's also a legal aspect. Like, for example, Germany has this e-invoicing regulation coming up next year, and I think that enables them to have the proper strategy to get there. And in general, it offers full control and simplification of the user and the support workflows, because you're in control of everything and you don't have to build your features around something generic ChargeBee made for everyone, but you actually don't really need that. So there was a hope for simplifications in the code, but also in the user workflows. So I hope I've convinced you, because we already built this thing, so it's too late to say something. Player 4 enters. It's called Charger. We built it, as I said, over 3 years with some interruptions. We were working with the developers at Steady, so it's really a collaboration effort, and I really value that because I think we both help each other in the best way. Let's look at the goals. What do we have to do? The first thing we need to do is to do minimal changes to the Media Makers app, because developers at Steady are still working on that app. They don't want the noise. They want to keep their development cycles. So we should develop this charger thing in a way that's as independent and noise-free for them as possible. So we did actually one change on that application, but I'll come to that later. Of course, we need to cover all the communication interface. Anything that this Media Makers app listens to or sends to ChargeBee has to be supported. We need to cover subscription life cycles, creation cancellation trials, and other things. We need to cover the billing life cycles, so invoicing, payments, refunds, and integration with the payment gateways. We need to have a UI that's performant, which is, I'm putting it here. It was not originally a goal, but in the end, we actually spent some time making sure the search and the querying were going to be efficient, even with millions of records. And the final thing is to migrate user data. And that's actually a very important part, because that influences all the decisions we'll make. Because at some point, we need to migrate the user data with no data loss, preserve data integrity, and make sure they're not built on both of the services, because that would be bad. And this migration can realistically only happen at the very end. You don't want to migrate users on production before you're 98% sure your app does what it's supposed to do, because it's about money, so you can't really take any risk. So that's all great, but what do we have? What do we have in our pack? What is the starter pack of the reverse engineer? Because that's essentially what we did. We had to reverse engineer a software with access to their API documentation. That's great. It exists. It's not so bad. We had access to a staging instance for ChargeB, which luckily contained all kind of test data from the study people that was accumulated there for years. That's also a great resource. And we have access to the media maker's app code so that we can figure out what do we actually need to implement that this app cares about. Because ChargeB has like 100 endpoints and 100 webhook events. We don't care about everything, we just care about what this app cares about. Okay, let's build, unless I lost everyone, but okay. So, what do we start with? We start with the data model, of course, and you might think, okay, this is going to be hard. You have to come up with a data model for this complex building thingy. But the thing is, if you followed, we have to migrate users at the very end of this process, which means you don't really make decisions on the data model. It has to be almost the same as the one from ChargeB. And you're doing yourself a favor in making the migration later way easier if you have a data model that is somehow the same. So it's not a good time to change all of the field names to something else. It's going to be way easier for developers to say the invoice on ChargeB amount adjusted is called also amount adjusted on our end. So the data model was actually rather straightforward. We opened the API documentation and we copied the entire structure that we could derive from it. Then once we have the data model, we can start building a communication layer. We already have everything we need. We have a database with the tables, with the records, and we can start building the communication layer. So we know what the Media Maker's app listens to, and we know what it cares about, so we can create the API endpoints to create or view or update resources. We can send the webhook events that we care about. And we're already done. Amazing. We're doing great progress. And then the next step is, once you've done this, to at least, if you want to build an MVP and say, OK, this can work, let's at least build a happy path. In this app, what happy path means is a user signs up on the Media Maker's app. We create a user on Charger. And the user subscribes to publication on the Media Maker's app. And then we create a subscription for them. Asynchronously, we create invoice, payment, process them at the gateway, send some webhook events about these events to the Media Maker's app. After some time, the payment gateway will say, this payment was successful, so you can update your records, send some events again, and after a month, if the subscription is like a month, you renew it, and you start the whole dance again. That's a happy path. And it's actually, it looks simple on paper. Maybe, I find it simple on paper. But already a lot has been achieved at this stage, because that means we've integrated with 3 payment gateway providers, PayPal, Braintree, GoCardless, which all have their own corex. We have a subscription lifecycle that works because the subscription auto-renews after a month or a year. We also have a billing lifecycle because we can invoice and collect money from people. So it's already quite some work that's been achieved. And when we got there, that was already a milestone of we can create a user and take the money and distribute it to the publisher. But there's a little thing missing in this picture is that so far there's no way to create those users on Charger. It just works on paper, but at some point, on staging at least, the Media Maker's app should be able to create some users on Charger. Otherwise, we don't have proof that it works for real. So the way we did this is that's the only change we did on this app. We added a way to mark users as being migrated on Charger so that we could route the calls to either ChargeB or Charger based on this Boolean. And we also added a multiplexer because some calls have to be sent to both services. Yeah, so that's the multiplex. So we have a communication layer, we have a happy path, we have ways to create users, new users on Charger, on our test environment. We also need an admin UI, which we've done with Phoenix and Daisy UI, because why would you choose something else nowadays? It's pretty standard, nothing shocking. It's an admin UI with tables and search filters and all that. And a final thing that we did, which I think is kind of great, is, and also a benefit of building this custom solution, since both apps are Elixir, this actually enabled us to have test suite on both ends that would test interaction with the other app. So if I send this request to you, what happens on your side and what happens on mine, and the other way around, to have a test suite that says, if I do this, if I send this message to you, what happens on my side and what are the consequences? And that's actually very valuable, because then you're sure that you can, at the minimum, have some smoke test of some user flows cover that make sure that the whole user flows from creating an account to paying your invoice are actually covered and work not just in your head or not just in your local testing, but in the test. The way that it works is that for each of the apps, there's a new mix environment, and you can start both apps in your network, and then the second rectangle that you see is an example of how you would do it in the test. You can fake that some user is, you're not faking, you're making a post request to the Media Maker's app for a subscription to create one. And what happens when you create a subscription is an invoice should be created on Charger, and Charger should send a webhook event back to the main app to say, I've created this invoice. And the Media Maker's app says, OK, I've heard you've created an invoice, I'll create a copy for myself. And on the second line, we dispatch to the webhook events on Charger's side. And then the last line asserts that the invoice was created on the other app. So it's very powerful, because then you really have a strong coupling and ways to test interactions between two apps that are very separate. OK, so far so good. So what is this talk about? Because I've only talked about things that work, right? So let's look at the fun, or let's start the rant, I don't know. One of each. Who in the room has heard of proration? Proration. OK. So proration is like, OK, I've subscribed to your publication for, let's say, €5, and a quarter of the month goes through, and I decide to upgrade because I like you so much. I upgrade to something that costs €10. Proration is to say, OK, you're upgrading after a quarter of a week, so you're not paying €10 for the month. You're going to pay a quarter of €5 and 3/4 of 10, because that's your usage of the service. So far, so good. It's actually fair, right? It makes sense. Why would I pay €10 if I'm only using it for 3 weeks? But, there's a but, ChargeBee has two workflows for this. It depends on the current payment status. So if I'm like a quarter of a week, a quarter of a month through the month, and my payment is paid already, it's going to create another invoice with the higher amount and create a credit note, which is a legal document, official legal document that says some of the funds of the first invoice were applied on the next invoice, right? You have an invoice with a payment, a second invoice with a payment, and a document that connects both of them. But if the payment of your current invoice is in progress, it's going to move this payment to the second invoice. And by moving, I mean changing the association. So you end up with an invoice that doesn't have payment and an invoice that has two, both in progress, and a credit note that connects everything together. And you're like, OK, this is fine. What's the problem? I don't see the problem. Well, the problem is that, for example, if someone has 3 plans, you can upgrade 4 times if you want within the month. And instead of having a linear way of generating invoice in the same fashion, you actually have a tree. And every time someone upgrades, you can be in one of the other situation, right? So if someone upgrades 3 or 4 times in the term, you end up with 4 or 4 power 2 options. And this you have to cover in your test. You have to cover in the way you handle your billing. And suddenly, everything is not complex times 2, it's complex power 2. Did you follow me? Was that understandable?
Is proration a charge fee thing, or is this?
No, I think this is just a billing term to say you're billed for a proportion of your usage. But I'm not stopping there. There's also refunds. I haven't talked about refunds so far. Okay, how the hell can I get a refund? If I cancel my subscription in the middle of my term, I get a refund. So if I pay 10 euro, I cancel mid-month, I get 5 euro back. That's also fair. What's the problem I get? This is fine. I agree, this is fine. But the refund can fail. Because let's say your credit card has expired, right? And the refunds, they go through the payment provider. So they use your payment method. If your payment method is gone, or you lost your card, or it has expired, we cannot send the refund to you. And then the admin can say, okay, let's meet at Elixir Park, and I will give you 5 euro in cash. Okay? And then they come home, and they go on ChargeBee, and they record an offline refund, which is a way to create a legal document about a transaction that happened for real, but not digitally in the system. And you can also create, you can also just be nice to your user. And I don't know, someone was rude with you, and the admin is like, okay, well, you know what? I'll give you 3 euro, like discount on your subscription. So you can manually go to an invoice and say, I want to refund 3 euro on it. And then that will take the payment and refund 3 euro out of the 10. So far, so good. But now all of this can be combined with what I talked about before. So you can be in a situation where someone has been refunded 3 euro and then do 3 times an upgrade. And then all your billing calculation needs to account for this very complex situation where you have to make all kinds of decisions. Like if the refund is on payment 1 and I have to refund for the rest of the term, how do I refund the rest? And I'm not done. There's also offline payments, which is the same concept as offline refund. You want to track in the system that a payment happened, you actually have the money on steady account, but there's no trace of it at the gateway. Then the admin wants to record an offline payment. And again, this combines with all the things that I've talked about earlier. So if you have an offline payment on an invoice, how would you refund it because it doesn't exist? Or maybe it's an invoice with an offline payment and half of the payment that's still in progress, and then you can technically refund half of the invoice, right? Invoice can have multiple payments associated. One can succeed, one can fail. And then you have an invoice that's in, like a Schrodinger's cat. It's both paid and not paid. So you have to build support features to handle this case and make a decision. ChargeBee also has a very wild concept of user wallets. So it's a property on the user record that says excess payments and refundable credits. It's not tied to any legal document. It's magical money that they put there when they don't know what else to do with the situation. And then, for me, it's wild because I'm like, this money is not connected to an invoice or a credit note. Like, how could this work? You end up with users who have excess payments of, let's say, 15 euro, but then they left. They canceled their accounts, so you don't have a way to refund them. And ChargeBee sometimes would take that money and apply it on the next invoice, but not always. And reverse engineering that was extremely complex because the decision they make to use this sort of magical wallet is not documented anywhere. And my final pet peeve, and that's just like the end of the rant, I promise. GoCardless, which is a payment provider, because it's a credit card thing, things can take more time than PayPal or whatever. So if you want to refund something, you have to wait 7 days. Fair enough, but you also need to wait 7 days when you're using the sandbox and you're just a developer. So if you want to test that your refound code is working, you have to wait an entire week. And I remember asking Hannah, who's there, do you maybe have a refound at hand that I could use to test my code? Because otherwise I have to wait Friday next week to do something. Okay, that's the end of the rant. I hope I managed to convey the fun that it was to work around billing. And the fun thing for me is that none of this is really about code. Like once we knew what we wanted to do, the coding is not so hard. But finding out what do we even want to do and what do we want to support as a case was extremely complex. Because at this stage, we also don't know, we can't know how is the production data going to look like. So we don't even know if users are going to be in edge cases that we have not considered. So that leads me to the migration of users with forgiveness, because it's money, so you have to be a bit careful, and you cannot really afford to double bill someone, for example, or to cancel all their subscription. You cannot afford to migrate them with half of their invoice or with like wrong amounts on it. So it's a very serious and difficult task. Let's look at it. What do we want to do? We want to start the migration of one user. We mark the user as migrated. We fetch the data from ChargeBee, all of it, everything. So that can take 30 to 45 minutes if the user is really a fan of people somehow. I think the boss of Steady had quite a lot of invoices. Then we map this data to our model, and we send it as a payload to some migrate endpoint on Charger. Charger then will create all the resources, and when it says OK, then we post the subscription on ChargeBee. The job is done, theoretically. And of course, everything needs to happen in transactions on both sides, right? Because on one hand, you've marked the user as migrated on the Media Makers app, so you want to be able to roll that back if something fails. And on Charger as well, roll back all the creation of our resources if something fails. So how do we want to do this? Of course, we want to do this with Oban to the rescue, because Oban is great. It's amazing. Let's look at why. We wanted to optimize parallelization because there's 600,000 users on Steady to migrate. So we cannot migrate them one by one. At some point, we'll have to run some batches of migration workers. And Oban is just great for that, because you can say, you can enqueue 1,000 workers before going to bed, and they will be processed maybe 2 by 2 if you want to. And ChargeBee has a rate limiter. So the Oban configuration, in this case it was Oban Pro, the Oban configuration allowed us to find really a sweet spot to make sure we can optimize the number of users we migrate without hitting the rate limiting of ChargeBee too much. What else? We get retry logic for free. Isn't that amazing? Retry logic for free. In the configuration of the worker, but also on the Oban dashboard, there's a button there where you can retry. When we were testing things, it was just so practical to say, OK, this worker has failed 3 times because of the rate limiting or because of timeouts. I can just manually retry to make sure this was not due to a proper error. So amazing. We also get error tracking in AppSignal for free. That actually allows us to make the migration errors part of a normal development workflow, where these are just bugs, and you can create them on your board, and you can treat them one by one and not be in this rush of trying to fix everything, but rather treat this as a normal bug, and you fix it in your current sprint. Oban dashboard, I've said it, it's amazing. Very practical and very satisfying to see the number of workers being like, yeah, I migrated a user, and the number going up. Yeah, Oban is just great. What else? I should be paid for this. We also built a migration dashboard because the migration we knew it would span over a couple of months. So it was worth to have a bit of effort to make it simpler and nicer for the developers to work around. It showed us the number of users that were migrated, the rate limit status. It showed us the jobs that failed, and it allowed to enqueue the worker for individual users, which was very practical on staging because you could find a user with a very specific kind of situation and test out the code for this user. And the final thing, the rollout. How the hell do you roll out a migration of 600,000 people? Well, you first start on staging, or at least that's what we did. We first started on staging just to check, does it even work? And then at some point it was not like, does it even work, but is the data integrity okay? So we took all kinds of users and looked at their data and compared, made sure they looked identical. And when we migrated around, I remember 80% of the users on staging, we thought, okay, now we can start on production. On production, they handpicked 5 users that were very simple. Just one subscription, renewal within the months, something manageable. And we waited a whole month to see, does the renewal work as we expect? And we picked users who were renewing in the coming days because we don't want to wait a month. When that was successful, we did it again with users with more wild characteristics to make sure it worked properly. And we also enabled the random creation of users on Charger so that we flipped a coin when you create an account to sometimes create you on Charger and sometimes create you on ChargeB, so it would create a bit of a mix of also new users, not migrated users. And once all of this happened, I think that was already 5 weeks through the migration period, we started to increase the batches and to make bigger batch of users on production. And in the end, we managed. I wasn't there anymore, they took over, but they managed to migrate the 600K users. Yay! Woohoo! Amazing. So we actually did it. We built a custom solution. It was long and very interesting. And at the beginning, it felt like it was a lot of work, but I think with the right people and enough support, you actually can get there. And now they're using it on production. I think it works fine. You can ask them. Maybe I've been bullshitting you the whole time, and it's like total crap. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Agathe. That was great. I also have too much experience with billing systems, so there's like some hate love. Do we have some questions there? Before I have one very specific hate love item that you didn't mention. What do you do with chargebacks?
Oh
like
my God.
Yeah.
I actually did not touch this part. One of the developers did it, and I was like, this could take another 6 months. And the way this one word affects all the decisions you made before. Because you're like, we thought like, oh, we don't need to care about chargebacks now. We only will look at it when we've done everything else. Well, maybe we should have looked at it at the beginning.
Yeah, listen, you want to jump in there?
Yes, very interesting talk. You kept saying like 10 euros and 3 euros, and those obviously are example numbers. Is that the typical size, or are we talking about 50,000 euros for a typical? What was the real distribution look like?
The people who subscribe to podcasters would pay, I think, between 1 to 15 euro, but maybe Kai and Dirk can say something about it. But I think it's quite in that range, no?
The average is $5.
$5, okay.
Okay, so then I'm asking why did you bother going to the proration? Why did you just not donate that amount of money and save yourself the extra torment of figuring out the difference?
Because it was like that from the beginning when we chose ChargeB, and like it was built in the whole proration thing there, and you can't change that after 10 years.
Okay.
Yes.
And also, you can pay yearly, right? So you can't just pay month to month, but you can also pay, I don't know, 60 euros a year. And then it gets interesting, right?
Okay.
Because
Okay.
the year is very long and
Okay.
Thank you so much. Oh yeah, there's one more.
Was the custom solution work? How much money are you saving?
So let's say we save. Wait, the number
It's a lot of money, man.
has 5 figures per month.
5 figures per month.
Yes.
You're saving.
Yes.
Very good.
Then worthwhile.
Alex's success story, yeah.
In the very beginning, we had this like 2 slides of goals for this rewrite, and money was like top of it, so that sounds good. How about the other goals? Like, was it like success in like independence, and you basically rebuilt the same system? So how does it get better if it's the same system now?
So it was actually a bit of a. It was quite frustrating because at the beginning you're like, this is going to be so much simpler, but the simplifications can only happen after you've migrated all the users, and even then you might find out that you cannot migrate. You cannot do the simplifications because you have past users in very weird combination. But there's one simplification that we made and that we could make because it would only affect future things. For example, on ChargeBee you can refund an invoice. So you can select an invoice and say, I want to refund €7 on it. And that causes all kind of headaches on like how you distribute the €7 over the many payments you can have. So what we did instead is that we only allow support to refund a payment. And then it's one payment, and if you want to refund the whole invoice, you have to refund each payment individually. And this, from a logic perspective, made it way clearer because it's one payment, it exists at the gateway, it has an ID, and you can refund up to €3 on it because this is its value. So that's the sort of things we could do, but it's mostly about things that the support could do that only affects something in the future and that cannot affect something in the past. And then I don't know if there were other simplifications done after. I know for taxes, for sure, there was some simplifications after. Yeah.
What about this observability part with having access to logs and maybe traces?
Oh, yeah.
It's much better?
Yeah, much better. That's something you can already do when you're programming, and the developers that studied, they were already starting to log all kinds of things that they were actually interested in. I think that already helped them quite a lot because then they could have logs that make sense for you as a developer. And you can trace specific events. There's some things we did not implement, for example, because we thought like, it's very unlikely that someone gets into this situation, but you can log all of this and say, okay, if this happens, then we can resolve the situation maybe with support and do it in a different way. But there's a couple of things like that where we thought, we are not going to implement this. We are just going to log if it happens and then figure it out like in a more physical way with the actual user, because the cost of the solution is so high. Just to fix 2 users, that makes no sense. Yeah. Yep.
So again, I would have thought that more of those cases fell into that category, that it would have been just easier to route them to support and say, we're giving you, whatever it is, free things for 2 months or something like that, and just be done.
Yes, I thought so too, but they actually have quite a number of users, and this means that things that I thought would not happen so often actually happen on a weekly basis. So for example, having a payment at the gateway that get not in sync anymore with your version of your payments. Somehow the notification is not sent. You're not receiving it. Then I thought like this is probably happening twice a year, no? It doesn't, it's happening every week. So we built a small thing in the UI where a support or a developer can manually mark a payment as successful because they know on the gateway it's been like that. And when they told me like we need to build this feature, I was like, are you sure? Like, is it really worth this effort? It's probably just a handful of them. And actually, no,
And so again, this happened when somebody's credit card hadn't timed out or whatever it is. It wasn't them rolling over their credit card number. This just happened for failure on the back end?
Yeah.
Or
I think it's sometimes it's network between the gateway providers and this app. Some message don't come through. Sometimes it's gateway providers not having a way to resend the same event because it causes some, how do you say? It causes some corruption issues or things like that. And sometimes it's a bug on our end, like somehow we didn't receive that message. We had a database connection timeout. And so it's not something you can fix, that's what I mean. It's like, it's not something that's in your control so much, but it does happen way more than I thought. So we did build this thing. Yep.
You described the part of the subscription a lot, and the app is called Charger that you built. How does it handle the distribution part? So, like collecting the money for a podcast and sending it to the podcaster.
So Charger only bills people and make sure the payments are processed. And then the reasons why we're sending all these webhooks to the Media Makers app is that the Media Makers app does the accounting. And based on this accounting, then they distribute the money to the publisher every month, I think. And then finance takes care of that. I think it's like an offline thing, or I'm not sure. But there is an idea. Last year, there was an idea of moving all of the accounting to Charger, because Charger is actually the one who knows about invoices and credit notes. And you would get a little bit less of problems of like this webhook events did not go through and your invoice on the other side is not in the right state. So it would make sense that's an opportunity for a huge refactor to move all of the billing to Charger, and then the Media Makers is only about the publishers and what they can do on the app. Yep.
Do you consider for staging, do you consider like staging the new customers straight to the new system and then sort of observing the system this way, sort of hand-picking it?
The production one, you mean?
Yeah.
There's a privacy issue, I think. I think we did not consider it, but I did not consider it for the fact that I'm not supposed to see customer data as a like developer. It could have been interesting. What we try to do instead is to reproduce situations with our own users. And especially when we had bugs on production during the migration, then I tried to recreate the situation of this person to make sure my fix is actually fixing something. But yeah.
Amazing. There was a ton of questions here, so let's give a round of applause. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Agathe. Let's take a 5-minute break here. Some drinks. You can ask Agathe still questions if you have more, and if you have something you want to share, you can put it on the spot, like something you learned today, some mini lightning talk, something you saw with Elixir 1.20, for example. Just feel free to put yourself here and you can get in front of us and share a bit. One drink maybe, everyone, and then we just come back here. so? Vielleicht hier. Meine Zinsen, nee. Kriegt man nur Spam. An welche hast du das geschickt? Dominik at Diode oder ja, Dominik at... Ah, meine Firma.
Check nochmal.
Lieferando.
Dominik?
Ja. Ich finde es immer super, wenn man seine ganzen E-Mails allen Leuten zeigen kann.
Nee, ich habe es gerade gesehen. Lightning Talk.
Da, okay. Oh, perfekt.
Jo.
Lass mich das runterladen. So, ich lasse dich gleich... Ich wollte ganz... Welcome back, everyone. I'm just like in the mood of speaking German or thinking German, so I'm switching back. I have one small thing to share, if everyone can see that, because we were talking about like how we use agents, and then we talked about tight wave integration. And I was just like, something that I started doing in more of my apps is I started adding like a fragment like this to a lot of my project that I debug. And what this is like an HTTP endpoint that takes a string that's coming in, evals the code, and just returns the expression. And the reason I've been doing that is so I can integrate that with agent debugging, right? So this is being wrapped in like in a script here. For example, in this project, there's a script remote RPC, and then this is supposed to send a HTTP request, gets like the number of processes here, and gets that back. And it's getting the number of processes from my phone here in this case, right? So I'm this guy who did the Elixir desktop project. We do like desktop programs and mobile programs with Elixir, and so there's a beam running here. And this finally allowed me to debug that while it's running on the phone. Often there's a question like, why is it slow? Why does it look like this when it's on the phone? But when I'm the software engineering joke, like it works for me, you know, like it's not very helpful usually to the customer. Like so, this finally allows us to debug it, and of course I'm using that in the agent. And something like this, I assume everyone is using Claude Code here or some kind of CLI agent at this point, right? Who is using some kind of command line agent right now? Yeah. So I'm not talking about something completely confusing here. So something like this, I felt like working really good. Oh, look! Today I started trying Fable, amazing model. But I have a small skill that describes a bit like what Elixir is and how you debug and what's useful. Like actually, a lot of these tools that I have a hard time using, like the debugger or Archon or the tracing, like that I find very difficult and complicated to use. The agent has no problems with that, right? It churns through that, tags the processes, finds the processes, and I can ask him very complicated questions, like what is producing most CPU churn, for example, right now on my phone, right? And it's going to go in, it's debugging the processes, and gives me the report you see here. And then I can ask it also to make the fixes. Just wanted to share that real quick. If you haven't done something like this yet in your project, I heard the Tightwave MCP does something very similar. So try that out and see. I feel like that's one of the real superpowers of Elixir. Because when you talk next time to a Rust developer, you can show him like, this is something you cannot do, but I can do that like on my live systems while I debug. It's really a superpower, and it makes finding bugs so much easier.
Have you thought about using the built-in SSH so that you have a secure connection? Because it's basically remote execution as a service right now, right?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, it's also super dangerous. Like, kind of ensure this is only in debug, right? And it's like, don't ship this to you. There's some disclaimers to put here. I thought about this last time when Kara talked about the SSH, and I thought this is so amazing. And then I looked into this, and then I was like, well, but it's like only like this. That's the diff here that I patched, right? So there's no new dependency, there's no new nothing, there's no SSH application that I need to start up. That's it. There's just one HTTP handler more here. And so the SSH idea is amazing, but this was quicker to do. But yeah, I love the idea actually.
What about the attack vector? If you forget to remove that and ship it in the production app, it could be quite dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
What Dominic does is not security sensitive at all.
This is what I want to share, and with that, I think Smithy You want
Do you have the code somewhere lying around, like on GitHub or whatever?
I can share this I mean, where I showed it right now is like the part of the app that's unfortunately not open source, but I can share the snippet. And the skill, actually I've created a skill to add the snippet as well. So it's like, I can add it in my projects.
So I will talk about Smithy Beam. This is an update talk. I gave the first introduction in April at this place. I did a lightning talk at Malaga about this project. That's my open source project called Smithy Beam. I'm working on this like for almost a year or a little less. It's a contract first API development thing. Smithy for the Beam. Very quick, my name is Frank. I worked at Klarna for the last 7 years and Erlang Elixir developer. So what is Smithy? Smithy is an interface definition language developed by AWS. It's a thing that apparently is quite old. The idea is quite old. So Smithy is like an open source, AWS-driven enterprise solution for the problem. The idea is that you define your API interfaces in a model language, in a file, and then you have code generators for target languages, and you can generate server and client code in many target languages from the same model. AWS uses this actually to generate their 400 plus SDKs in like around 13 languages, which is basically not maintainable manually. Smithy Beam is the code generator plugin for Beam languages along Elixir and Gleam, hopefully sometime in the future. So what happened since April? It's open source on GitHub. I did a complete rewrite following the official code generator guidelines. It's actually very strictly defined by AWS. It's awesome documentation. It's a huge language. You have many, many examples and very strict guidelines how to write the code generator. The generator itself is developed in Java. And why I did this is there are other code generators for other languages that are not following the strict guidelines, but they are basically have different use cases and maybe different goals, I don't know. But I wanted to be able to integrate custom protocols because Smithy comes with an environment and tools, and you can combine tools. You can basically have plugins for your generators to customize the code generation. And I wanted to do this, and I will show you a use case later. Then I did a lot of testing, basically correctness, lines of code, baseline comparison with Java generators, which are the official AWS ones. And then I also investigated use cases, because why a code generator for Beam languages? I wanted to understand where can I use this usefully. So some facts. I have full client and server generation for Erlang and Elixir. I have like roughly half of the Smithy traits implemented and around 70% of the AWS features, which probably doesn't tell much for you. AWS features are like protocols and authentication, retry, pagination, and stuff. And for example, the official AWS EC2 model has around 800 operations, which are basically API functions, and 4,000 types, which is surprising to me. It's quite a lot. So the AWS models are huge. And the Erlang and the client generation, I also counted some numbers. It has like 18,000 lines of code and 60,000 lines of code for the type modules, which is like enormous. And this excludes all the helper modules that you might need for pagination or signing and stuff retry. So it's a huge amount of code that you generate. And it's still a problem because I found difficulties compiling Elixir clients because the compiler basically gave up at some point. So it works fine with Erlang, but these I need to reduce somehow, find a solution to reduce the amount of code that is generated. And if you ever worked with AWS, you probably only use like 10 functions from the SDKs. You never use all the 800 stuff. So it's an unsolved problem for me. So the use case I found is OpenReac. Maybe you know OpenReac is a key value database. It's a very old project. It's the open source continuation of the original Reac database. It's maintained by the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation. I joined the open source team. It's a very old project, 16, 17 years old. They have some big active long-time users, so they actively maintain this. And it's very much in development. So it's not an old-fashioned thing. It's, they try to push new versions. So what I looked at was the OpenReac API. It's actually two APIs, HTTP and protobuf. I will ignore protobuf for now. It's basically out of the history of the project. When they started, we had a different understanding of HTTP standards. Now the standards are more aligned. So what OpenReac does is very custom and not so much aligned with the current standard, whatever this is. And for example, the OpenReac HTTP API heavily uses header fields to encode data. For example, they use custom prefixes, so they have like a header key that starts with X React meta, and then they have a custom name and the value, so you can put data into your protocol headers, which is something that you shouldn't do actually today. But it's in production and it's quite fast. So what I first investigated was to model the OpenReac API with OpenAPI, which is basically the standard that everybody knows. And I found that especially this custom prefixes is not possible to model with OpenAPI. So I immediately found, no, this is not a way to go. But I found that Smithy is actually able to support this, which is great. So the use case with OpenReac I have is multi-language client generation. The OpenReac HTTP API is itself also quite big. It's 100 functions, 140 types around. And my goal was first to generate clients for 6 target languages. Java, Python, TypeScript, Rust are all supported by the official AWS code generator. So that was basically easier to get into. And Elixir and Erlang, my goal was to use Mr. Bean for them. So first thing I did was to model OpenReac API with Smithy, which turned out to be a 2,000-line code model file. And what I realized, okay, just having the model is not enough. When I generate the model with the standard built-in features, I get like empty functions, basically, because the protocol, particularly for OpenReac, is not supported by Smithy, obviously. So what you can do is to create custom protocol plugins per target language. So I have a little repo with one folder for each language, and I started to create these plugins for every language. And you can basically imagine a protocol plugin like it's basically a compiled Java file that you register with your generator build configuration, and during the generation, this plugin will be called and will basically emit custom code, which is quite nice, so because it's basically part of the process then. And that's an example for a Java function call. And just to give you a visual, that's the same for the Erlang So what is nice about this, you have defined input, output types. You have all the functions defined. And yeah. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That's already the finish of the official part. So let's get together in the kitchen again, mingle, and talk about fun stuff. Elixir,
Can I ask a question?
You can definitely ask a question.
Right, so this would be a classic question for Germans here. Who thinks doing formal stuff with these types of things is a good thing versus who just likes hacking around in their own API stuff? So, because you did a similar type of thing in terms of reverse engineering an API that you could have specified a little bit more or more formally, whatever it is. But who sees value to Snoopy who has to use other language types, or who's like, this isn't a problem, I just code everything in Elixir, have a nice day? I mean, so, thoughts?
Code generators are awesome.
Okay.
No, code generation is awesome. It never works like it does in Rust. And Elixir, fantastic.
Okay, so you think this is a positive idea?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it's 100% implemented, every damn thing that you can do, say an open API, can be done there.